Hi, it's Christina with the Sisyphean Journal. We have two safe and legal deaths from the cemetery of choice today, including egregious malpractice, including this poor immigrant woman who was the sole support for her family, had just moved them into a house she was so proud to have bought, and then they killed her. But the first death I'm going to talk about is a young woman named Tammy, who was 19 years old when she went to the Delaware Women's Health Organization on September 16, 1977, for an abortion that was performed by Dr. Mohammad Imran. Tammy was 18 weeks pregnant. After the procedure, she was so weak that they put her in a wheelchair to push her out the door. One report says that she actually had a seizure in front of the nurses. And I've talked about this before. It's this thing that once the fetus is dead, a lot of these clinics, they just wash their hands of the woman. She's no longer their concern, to the point where they put women who are too weak to walk into wheelchairs and shove them out the door to die. And that is what happened to Tammy. Now, the family's lawyers sued Imran for leaving the clinic to go to another facility before Tammy was stable. So she was shoved out the door by staff who were like, oh, doctor's gone. That's what happened to Sharon Hamplin in California. Bruce Steers, doing her abortion, reaches in, gives the assistant a funny look, says, I think I pulled bowel, and then leaves while she's still in recovery. She's too weak to walk. They put her in a wheelchair, shove her out the door, and she bleeds to death on the way home. This is not some weird thing. This is not some fluky thing. Arnold Bickham did it to Sylvia Moore. She was too weak to walk. He called her lazy, put her in a wheelchair, and shoved her out the door to die. And somehow I'm some misogynistic anti-choicer for thinking that these women deserve better than this. And that guy Bruce Steer in California, who abandoned Sharon and she got loaded into a wheelchair and shoved out the door to bleed to death, the pro-choicers rallied around him. He was charged with manslaughter in her death, and they started a legal defense fund and talked about what a wonderful guy he was. He was already in a lot of trouble with the medical board. If I recall correctly, he wasn't even supposed to be doing abortions unsupervised. And they're like, but he did an abortion. Good enough. That makes him a hero. You cannot trust the pro-choice movement. It's like trusting Black Lives Matter. Do you hear them crying about Amaria Jones or Legend Talaferro? Hell no. Because Black Lives Mattering is a smokescreen to hide what they're really about. And the idea that the pro-choice movement is about protecting women is a smokescreen. Yeah, they just like Black Lives Matter prefers that little children don't just get shot when they're in their homes. They prefer that no stray bullets go through the window and rip out a 13-year-old girl's throat. But, they just don't consider it something worth getting upset over. And it's the same with these abortion deaths. The pro-choice movement doesn't consider this to be something worth getting upset over. So, at any rate, Tammy's family sued. The lawsuit got $2.25 million for Tammy's family, and it was put in a court-controlled account for her son, who was 9 months old when his mother died. But Imran's insurance company was defunct, so he had to settle again with Tammy's family, and he's still practicing obstetrics in New Jersey. Then we have another case. We've got this Dr. David Gluck. Now, his medical license had been revoked for 3 years because he was selling controlled substances to pay off his gambling debts. Okay? He managed to get his license back on appeal. He was medical director at CRASH, the Center for Reproductive and Sexual Health, doing evidently not a whole lot to oversee it. He was there when patient KB died on the table in 1988. She's the one who was charted as pink responsive alert, even though she was already dead. It drives me crazy that ordinary pro-choice citizens don't get upset about this. It really drives me crazy. But at any rate, the state finally stepped in and they closed Crash temporarily, but it never reopened. But Choices Women's Medical Center in Queens decided that they would hire Gluck. So their medical director said, "We are firmly committed to helping people who are skilled medical professionals who have had a fall from grace." So their kindness to Gluck wasn't a kindness to 36-year-old Alerte. She was an immigrant from Haiti. She had come to, it's like Karnamaya Mongar. She came here looking for a better life, and she trusted the wrong people. Alerte was told that her 19-week fetus had deformities, so she went to Choices for a Safe Legal Abortion on September 16, 1994. Now, staff said that after Gluck completed the abortion, Alerte was, quote, feisty, telling nurses she wanted to go home, which is a sign she's going into shock. But you don't expect really high-quality medical care. You don't expect doctors to even know as much as EMTs do when you're in a medical clinic. All of a sudden, she coded. She went into cardiac arrest. Staff attempted to revive her, then transported to a hospital. Now, her death was tentatively attributed to amniotic fluid embolism. Alerte's 66-year-old mother, who speaks only French, was described as throwing her hands in the air and sobbing. "What are we going to do? What are we going to do? We can't go back to Haiti." Alerte had been supporting her mother and 3 daughters, working as a caretaker for an elderly woman. And you can imagine the frugality that she had managed to buy a house for her family. They had only recently moved in. And all of that was tanked because this guy's income was more important than her life. So I really wish pro-choicers would stop trusting abortion clinics.